Now, you may wonder where the quadratic formula comes from. Well, it's actually pretty simple, but it's not pretty. The quadratic formula comes from taking your standard quadratic equation that you see here and solving it through the process of completing the square. So if you think about all the steps that you take to complete the square, we're going to apply those here, and you'll see that we end up with the quadratic formula. Now, the first step for completing the square is to get the variable terms on one side and the constant term on the other side. So we move that to the other side, and that becomes negative c. The next thing we do is to make sure that we have just a plain positive 1 x squared. And the way we can do that is by dividing everybody by the coefficient of the x squared term, which in this case is a. Now remember, a, b, and c are they're just numbers. So when we solve this guy, we are solving this for a particular, as a formula. So we're going to treat a, b, and c just as numbers. Now the next part of completing the square is where we have to divide by 2 and square it. So really what you're doing is you're taking this guy right here, and we're going to divide it by 2. And really what we want to do is multiply times 1/2, and we're going to square that result. And that's what we have to add to both sides. So I get b over 2 times a squared. And of course this gives me b squared over 4a squared. So that's what I need to add to both sides. So I'm going to do that right here. So I have to add b squared over 4a squared not only to the left, but also to the right side over here. Now keep in mind that the reason that we wanted to add that amount to the left side was so that we could create a square. And that square is going to be x, and it's going to be that b over 2a that we've seen before. The part that you have just before you square it. So we got plus b over 2a. Now the other side gets kind of tricky, but you just have to remember you're dealing with fractions. And so you have to get these guys to have the same denominator. Well, looking at this, I see, you know what? A is not the same as 4a squared. It's missing the factors of 4 and a. So I'm going to put that in both the top and the bottom. So what that gives me is all over 4a squared, and negative c times 4a is negative 4ac, and then there's that plus b squared. And maybe at this point, things are starting to look a little familiar to you. Well, once I'm here, I want to use the square root property. The square root property basically says that if I take the square root of both sides, remember the plus or minus, then that's going to help me get this square gone. And it also gives me my two solutions. It helps give me the two solutions. So x equals b over 2a, excuse me, x plus b over 2a equals plus or minus. I want you to check this out. In this denominator, I can do the square root of 4a squared, and that just gives me 2a. In the numerator, I can't really break anything out of that guy. So I'm going to leave it just the way it is, minus 4ac plus b squared, but I'm actually going to rewrite that. I'm just going to rewrite those terms, so that's b squared minus 4ac. And then I'm going to move this term to the other side. So x is equal to, that's going to become a negative b over 2a plus or minus, this guy's over 2a, and there's my square root, b squared minus 4ac. And what you're going to notice here is that we have like denominators. So when I put everything over that common denominator of 2a, my numerator is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. So you see that we started with the quadratic equation, and I went through the steps piece by piece, and I end up with my quadratic formula. All you had to do was complete the square.